All right, those that have never been here before, quick overview of what this meeting's about. It's a little different from any other big book meeting, being that we don't do individual, people don't read. There's only one person that reads, that would be me. And during the reading, there's crosstalk. So we encourage a lot of people to ask questions during the reading or shout things out. Like when we're reading Bill's story, if somebody doesn't know what Armistice Day, you just shout, "What's Armistice Day?" Jack might say, "Well, it's Veterans Day." Or, and somebody else might say, "Well, it's when the war ended," right? And then we just keep moving along. It's not the time during the reading to check in and share, but it is for questions, like we're sitting on the couch and reading this together, okay? In the beginning, we don't do... We do an overview. We don't do any readings of chapter 5 and chapter 3. We do an overview of the big book so everybody knows why we're reading, what we're reading, okay? The big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is split up into 2 sections. This was a big aha moment when I started, but there's the stories in the back and then the first 164 pages in the front. That's where our program is. I was like, oh, I don't have to read that whole book. But the stories are very, very important. And they change with each edition. We've had 4 different editions. With each edition, we've changed the stories, but we don't change the 164. And that's what it says in the very beginning of our book in the preface. It says, there's a strong sentiment against any change being made to the 164, which outlines our program, right? And at the end of it, it says, we hope when you read this, you go, oh, I felt like that. I think this might work for me. We hope that when reading these stories or our program in the 164 that you go, I felt like that. I think this might work for me. That Me Too moment. And then in the forward to the very first edition in 1939, it says the main purpose of this book is to show you precisely how we have recovered. That means there's clear-cut directions in this book, and then there's some suggestions, right? The clear-cut directions are out of the book. 90 meetings in 90 days may be a very good suggestion, but it's not a clear-cut direction out of the book, okay? So when you know what the clear-cut directions are and where to find them, you feel a little bit more connected to this book and to the program, right? The forward to the second edition throws in some history, and then the forward to the third and the fourth, it tells you about how we've grown and how many more countries we're in and how many more people have been helped by this. And then the doctor's opinion right here is where we start the big book. We start the 164 basically, okay? All the way down to a vision for you. And in there, now, how many people in the very beginning, when you're in a meeting and you're new, you read chapter 5, and somebody at the end goes, our description of the alcoholic chapter, the our personal adventures before and after, make clear 3 pertinent ideas, A, B, C, right? And we just wait for them to finish, they clap, and they sit down. Basically what that's saying is, our description of the alcoholic, everything up until this point, the original manuscript said, that if you're not convinced of these 3 pertinent ideas, which are basically steps 1 and 2, please reread the book up until this point, or just throw it away. But being convinced, you're now at step 3. So what do we learn up until this point? We're learning about steps 1 and 2, that A, B, and C, that, oh my gosh, I'm an alcoholic, no human power, right? And we start, even when we look at that book in the beginning, we're like, what are they going to tell me, right? But the doctor's opinion, it's not Dr. Bob. Our 2 founders are Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. Dr. Bob, his story is at the end here, but Dr. Silkworth is the one that's, let's say, down at Harbor General, that every time we go down there and we're drunk, need detoxing, he's the one that goes, you again. Sorry, we don't have a pill that'll fix you. But whatever these men have to say seems to work. And not only that, but the good doctor talked about the allergy that we suffer from. Okay? And me just picking up this thing in the very beginning, not knowing if I'm an alcoholic, may really find myself in there. That there's a spiritual healing that has to happen. Basically a spiritual slap on the head, and they don't have a pill to fix that, right? And then we go into chapter 1 with Bill's story. In a speaker meeting, just like in a speaker meeting, Bill tells his story. He talks about what he's walked through, when he's crossed the line, and then one more time trying, and then stealing from his wife's purse, depression, and everything else that he encountered until the message was carried to him and the importance of carrying it to another. Right after that, we all chime in the next chapter, 2, there's a solution. We go, a lot of us felt just like Bill. You might be one of us, a real Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Don't worry, come along. We got a solution for you, right? More about alcoholism. We read it in a meeting. It starts off with, none of us wanted to admit we were real alcoholics, right? Nobody wants to say they're bodily, mentally different than their fellows. So just like in a participation meeting, we each tell a story. There's Fred the accountant, Jim the car salesman, the jaywalker. And maybe in there you might go, oh, Oh, I've done that. That's me. I felt like that, right? We've talked about spirituality a lot up until that point, and so right here there's a whole chapter dedicated to don't overthink the God thing. You basically lack that power. We lack that power. It's not a home study course. I couldn't do this on my own, but I lack the power to go home and just go, that was a bad idea. I should stop. Right? So there's something bigger than me out there. There's a power greater than me. No human power has been able to relieve me of my alcoholism, not even me, but something bigger than me can. If you got a God, good. If you don't worry about it. But it's a whole chapter dedicated to don't overthink it. Just come along for the ride. And in chapter 5, we start the steps with, if you are convinced, then you just did 1 and 2. Now let's do 3. Made a decision, right? We learned about self-will, and then we did an inventory, and we looked at resentments, fear, and sex, and we started really getting some facts about ourselves, and we started getting a little bit of freedom, too, because we're learning as we go about us. And in chapter 6, into action, we read it to somebody, and we got a little free, and we got a little bit of answers, and we started to learn how we can get rid of the character defects in good and bad. And we were willing, and we started clearing up the wreckage of our past. And after that, how do we keep that clean? Because in that process, somewhere the ice cube melted, and I'm not up here feeling like I'm a piece of crap and remorseful and everything else. I'm starting to feel some freedom now. I've gotten through the steps, and I'm starting to feel something different. How do I keep that? It's 10 and 11, which is at the end of chapter 6 into action, what we read last week. So this week, what are we going to be reading? Chapter 7, working with others, all about step 12. It's all about sponsorship. It's how we introduce ourselves now that we have that freedom and we've done the work and we have been relieved of that drink obsession. How do we reach our hand out to somebody? Okay? To the wives, to the family afterwards, to the employers. We will move into those next, but this book wasn't just picked up by us in the beginning. It also is the introduction to what happens afterwards and a vision for you where Bill sums it all up at the end. Remember, our book is meant to be suggestive only. We only had like 2 and 3 years sober when we started writing this book. Right? And the end of the 164 is us going, we realize we know only a little, but here's our book, Don't Die. Right? But that's the 164. That's how we recover from alcoholism and how we carry that message to others. And then Dr. Bob, Bill Wilson's our first founder, and Dr. Bob's our second. His story is always the first story in the stories. Any questions? Yes, no, yes. Okay, good. Yay! So we're going to be talking about working with others. And what we're going to do is we're going to break it up in 2 parts, okay? We're going to start on page 89, and we're going to go to page 96, okay? So, at the end of the last chapter, when we were talking about keeping ourselves clean, how do we review our steps? How do we keep checking with ourselves to make sure that we're not like building up more resentments, building up more hurt to others during our day, right? We do a 10 and we do an 11. When these crop up, because they will. And how we keep that stuff clean, right? And then it says, but there's more action to be needed. The next chapter is entirely dedicated to step 12. Step 12 is chapter 7, working with others. Now, what was done with me when I went through the steps out of this book is that this is where my sponsor started with me. And I'm going to tell you why. Because in the very beginning, when I don't know much about this book and I don't know much about these steps, I want to ask somebody that's really cool to be my sponsor. Oh my gosh, be my sponsor. Yes. So excited. She shared so cool. And then I go to another meeting where she's not at and somebody shares and they go, my sponsor said I got to go to 90 meetings in 90 days. And I go, she didn't tell me that. And then somebody else shares, well, my sponsor says I got to do this. I'm like, wait a minute, she didn't tell me that either. Hold on, maybe she didn't go to sponsor school. Maybe she doesn't know what she's talking about, right? And so the next time we meet, I'm not all bubbly. I'm looking at her like, yeah, what do you want? Yeah, sure, I'll do whatever you say. Yeah. But I'm starting to doubt whether I picked the right person. How do I pick the right person? How do I know this person knows what they're talking about? And they're not blowing smoke up my ass. So this is where my sponsor started. She said this is where her sponsor started with her, so that she knew that she got her directions as well right out of the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, okay? So now I've done all my steps. I've done 10 and 11. We're on page 89, working with others. Practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. It works when other activities fail. This is our 12th suggestion. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Do you ever feel like you're not in a bright spot and the last thing you want to do is go to a meeting? But somehow when you leave, you feel better? Like, it's weird. Perhaps you're not acquainted with any drinkers who want to recover. You can easily find some by asking a few doctors, ministers, priests, or hospitals. They will be only too glad to assist you. Here's a direction. Don't start off as an evangelist or reformer. Okay? Now, remember when this book was written, we didn't have meetings down the street and on every corner where you could go in and a newcomer stood up and got a newcomer chip and said, I need a sponsor. And we went, oh, and we all swarmed them and told them, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do it, right? We didn't have that. So now that I've done my steps since 1939 and we're only in scattered places throughout the country, how am I going to find somebody that I can help? And that's why they're saying that maybe a doctor or somebody that might know of an alcoholic, a minister, a priest, could say, hey, I know so-and-so's cousin. They might need somebody to talk to, right? And it says don't start out as an evangelist or a reformer, okay? We had, what had just happened in those, what was big right then? Yeah, what? No, not necessarily the Oxford group, but Prohibition. So there were people out there trying to get you to not drink because they wanted Prohibition to stay in force. Activists. And they didn't want us to come off as somebody that was trying to keep Prohibition, right? We were just trying to be helpful. So one of the first things is we got to remember we want to just be helpful. We're not out there. So that's what they're saying. And we don't want to be an evangelist either. How many people got sober on their first meeting, all shaky and a little scared, and somebody said, you've got to find God right now. And we went, oh, you're right. I'll stay sober and get all better. Not necessarily, because right then, I know for me, I can only speak for me, but for me, I walked in and I was just a little concerned about whether or not he was upset with me, right? But I knew that you guys were okay with me coming back. I knew with you guys, I felt welcome to come back in these rooms, even if I screwed up just the night before. I wasn't quite sure what my standing was on anybody else, up higher, right? But I knew in the rooms you guys put your hand out and you made me feel welcome. And I think that's what's most important, okay? So we don't want to start off or scare the new person because I've just gotten through my steps and I want to introduce myself to somebody, right? Unfortunately, a lot of prejudice exists with the God thing or with the Prohibition, right? Remember, prejudice is, I don't like it. You will be handicapped if you arouse it. Ministers and doctors are competent, and you can learn much from them if you wish. But it happens that because of your own drinking experience, you can be uniquely useful to other alcoholics. So cooperate, never criticize. Would that be another direction? Never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. One thing I want you to remember, too, is while we read this, is how many people go, yeah, the old-timers, they tell you, shut up, you don't know anything, you can't say anything for a year, and take the cotton out of your mouth, put it, I don't know, maybe. And I'll tell you, there's sometimes that you don't know what you're doing when you come into a meeting. And you may have sat in a meeting, a newcomer may have sat in a meeting and just went, I don't know what this is all about, but I'm going to share for about 30 minutes, and this is going on, and then my life story, because that's what I thought. And somebody goes, hold off, just shh. Listen, right? And then maybe it happened a couple more times and somebody stood up a little bit stronger with a bit more of a stronger personality and said, shut up, just take the cotton out of yours and put it in your mouth and listen for a second. But that doesn't mean that that's how we started off or those are the directions on how we talk to somebody that's new, okay? So don't get them confused. But it does say never criticize. To be helpful is our only aim. When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about them. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realizing they're dealing with a sick person. You don't want to go chasing after the person that doesn't want it. I can't remember what the story was, but where they chased the guy out the window and tried to get him to stay sober. And if Bill and Bob kept chasing after that very first person, they would have never met Bill Dotson, the man on the bed. So let God put in front of us who we're supposed to help, the ones that really want it right now. And maybe next week, that next person that we were chasing after will want it, or we'll get it some other way. If there's any indication he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually a wife. Get an idea of his behavior, his problems, his background, the seriousness of his condition, and his religious leanings. You need this information to put yourself in his place, to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. Sometimes it's wise to wait until he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in dangerous physical condition, it is better to risk it. Here's a direction. Shocker. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk. Unless he is ugly and the family needs your help. How many times does somebody go out to help somebody and the person that was drinking does not even remember the hours upon hours upon hours, and somebody's like, I'm doing a 12-step, I think I got him to a meeting, and they're like, I saw you when? No! Wait for the person to really want it. It says after he goes on a binge, when he's a little shaky, when he's, wanting it, Wait for the end of the spree, or at least for a lucid interval. That means he can kind of think clearly. Then let his family or friend ask if he wants to quit for good and if he is willing to go to any extreme to do so. If he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. You should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of their own recovery, tries to help others, and who will be glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. If he does not want to see you, here's a direction. Never force yourself upon him. I don't always follow that rule. Sorta. There is a story where somebody wanted to go to a meeting, wasn't sure if they wanted to go to a meeting, then I was like, well, I got to clean up my car anyway, so I was outside their house anyway when they called and said, I think I do want to go, and I'm like, oh, good, I'm here. They were either going to walk by me and go to the liquor store or get in my car, one thing or another, I'm not sure, but neither should the family hysterically plead with him to do anything about it, nor should they tell him much about you. It's kind of neat when you see the person's eyes light up when you go, oh yeah, I did that too, and they go, really? But if they've already heard your whole story from Aunt Sue, who just was like, yeah, and then she did this and she did that. Oh, she did the same thing. When you meet the person, and it's like you don't have a chance to tell your story and let them go, oh, yeah, right? They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. You might place this book where he can see it in the interval. There is no specific rule can be given. There's lots of ways that we get this message. The family must decide these things, but urge them not to be over anxious, for that might spoil matters. Usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. Approach through a doctor or an institution is a better bet. If your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly, unless he's violent. Or, obviously, what else? If we're going to go into delirium tremors and our heart's going to stop or something, right? Let the doctor, if he will, tell him that he has something of a way of a solution. When your man is better, the doctor might suggest a visit from you. Though you have talked with the family, leave them out of the first discussion. That's a direction. Does everybody understand what that means? So, there's certain times that oh wow, comes when I'm just talking to one person that's walked through what I've walked through, right? But if the family's sitting there going, did you hear what she said? Did you hear? Did you hear? Wait. And I'm just like, whatever, I block everybody out. I don't want them involved in that moment where they go, so what are you here for? You know what I mean? Why are you visiting? And we get that moment to connect. So what they're saying is, Leave them out of the first discussion when we're introducing ourselves to somebody. So let's go back to Bill Dotson on the bed. You know what I mean? And I think a lot of this, I think back to that for a moment, okay? Bill Dotson, and the story is where they call up and they go, do you have anybody that could use our help? And they go, oh yeah, we got a real corker. He just beat up 3 nurses. We'll put him in a private room. And then somebody said, you know, when he woke up and Bill and Dr. Bob were sitting there, they didn't point at him and go, you better do as we say, shut up, take the cotton out, or don't tell us anything. They just listened to him, and when he told something, they kind of laughed. And they, well, yeah, me too. Yeah, we did that too. Would you like us to come back? Oh, you know what I mean? But we didn't shove it down their throat. And I think here where it's saying, let the doctor or somebody say, we have somebody that you might want to talk to. So if the person's open to that, don't bring it in like an intervention. You know what I mean? So I'm not sure whether at that time they actually had interventions. Yeah, so what this is saying is that if, when hospitalized, the doctor goes, hey, I think it might be wise for you to talk to Bill or Bob. You know, they've been coming to see you. This, you know, let them just meet with you one-on-one. But Bill and Bob, they came back the next day, and they didn't go, yeah, you'll listen to what we have to say. They just kind of, he goes, I think he said one thing about, I said something, and then they laughed at me, which I didn't like much, but, you know, they said, me too. They didn't laugh at him. They said, oh, we did the same thing. And they chuckled at their own experience. Yeah, and at first he was scared, and he says, I don't know if I can be what you guys are. I don't know if I can do this. And he sat on it one more day, and they visited him the next day. And then he goes, maybe I can. You know, that's kind of the way we do it. But we don't come in with somebody like coming in with, boom, you know, a sledgehammer on our head. And a lot of times when the family comes in, they don't understand. That they see, it's hard not to see them seeing us as a monster in their eyes when they're sitting there with us. So under these conditions, your prospect will see he is under no pressure when he meets with just you alone. He will feel he can deal with you without being nagged by his family or feeling the guilt of it, right? Call on him while he is still very jittery. He may be more receptive when depressed. Now, I know that I've done it. I don't know if anybody else has. But you ever get real excited when you meet somebody new in a meeting and you get up and you start talking to them and then you keep talking to them and you can see them almost backing off? Like, you know, and then we keep talking, we keep following them, and then you got to get these and you got to get those steps, and then you got to go to this meeting. Do you have a book? Hold on, come over here and meet this person over here. Get their number, and they're like, I just wanted to get my core card signed, you know? So it says, see your man alone if possible. At first, engage in general conversation. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Here's a direction. Tell him enough about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself. That's a direction. So it's not like shut up. And sometimes, what if they're not even an alcoholic? But we'll do all the talking and we won't let them say, oh, this is what I did, or this is why I'm here, you know? If he wishes to talk, let him do so. If he wishes to talk, let him do so. It doesn't say put the cotton in your mouth, does it? But that's how we're going to get to know the person, unless we allow them to, even just for a moment, go, hi, I've never been here before. I don't know. You know? I've never been to a meeting before. You know? You will thus get a better idea of how you ought to proceed. How can I be helpful to this person? If he's not communicative, give him a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. If he's in a serious mood, dwell on the troubles of liquor has caused you, being careful not to, here's a direction, moralize or lecture. So that's a direction. Moralize. It would be a good idea of to moralize. Yeah, it's like the characteristics. Not lecturing is going on and on and on about what, and moral is like to have a good moral thread is I don't lie. I never say I do not tell I never tell a tale. I never disobey my mom. I do it. You know, and the moral thread of certain things that we kind of grew up with, whether we. Good people would not do these things. Integrity is a good moral thread, yeah. But To moralize is to almost come from a place where we are perfect and we have perfect morals, and that person's not doing well and doesn't have it. But to moralize is to go, oh, that was bad. What did you do? You drank? Oh. Almost like that, oh. And lecture is to go on and on and on. So they're saying, don't do that. We're not going to talk down to anybody, and we're not going to lecture them. If his mood is light, tell him humorous stories about your escapades. Get him to tell some of his. When he sees you know all about the drinking game, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic. Tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Like in the doctor's opinion, right? But these are short, little brief accounts. Nobody, when they first get introduced to us, whether it's out there or in these rooms, is going to go, well, gee, should we sit down right now? I can read you the doctor's opinion. You'll know what I'm talking about, No, we just kind of say short little bits, right? I always think back to that lady with the yellow eyes. And she came up to me and she goes, my grandfather died of alcoholism and he turned yellow before he died. And my first thought was, what is your problem? Go away, right? But had she said, wow, no, I'm on my way to an AA meeting. I don't drink anymore. My eyes actually turned yellow before I stopped. And then she started to walk away. I'd be like, well hold on. Did you see my eyes were yellow? Wait, how did you do that? But she would have hit something deep inside me, and I would have heard what she said. But it would have been in a short, just everyday language, right? Give him an account of the struggles you made to stop. Show him the mental twist which leads to the first drink of a spree. We suggest you do this as we have done in the chapter on alcoholism. If he is an alcoholic, he will understand you at once. He will match your mental inconsistencies with some of his own. Me too! If you are satisfied he's a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady, because we're sick. We've got this allergy, right? Show him from your own experience how the queer mental twist condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he's seen it and wishes to discuss it. And be careful not to brand him an alcoholic. Here's a direction. Let him draw his own conclusions. Family members, people close to us. I don't know, that's something we each decide for ourselves, right? If he sticks to the idea that he can still control his drinking, tell him that possibly he can, if he's not too alcoholic. But insist that if he has a severe affliction, there may be little chance he can recover by himself. And continue to speak of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady. Fatal, dead. Talk about the conditions of the body and the mind which accompany it. Keep his attention focused, mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. So, if the doctor looks at my yellow eyes and goes, you keep drinking, you're going to die, Kelly. Do you think I went home and went, gee, the doctor said that I should stop? No! But maybe one of you came up to me and said, I stopped drinking. And I actually had yellow eyes before I stopped. I go, really? And I would have got some hope. And I would have heard you. And that's what they're saying. Doctors sometimes don't even want to just tell us what's going on because we don't want to listen. You will soon have your friend admitting he has many, if not all, the traits of the alcoholic. If his own doctor is willing to tell him that he's an alcoholic, so much the better, even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition. He has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question, if you will. A direction. Tell him exactly what happened to you and stress the spiritual feature freely. If the man be agnostic or atheist, make it emphatic that, a direction, and important because it's in italics. He does emphasize, highlight, put in bold letters, emphasize. He does not have to agree with your conception of God. He can choose any conception he likes, provided that he makes sense to him. The main thing is that he be willing to believe in a power greater than himself and that he live by spiritual principles. So, stress the spiritual feature freely. How often do we find some people, they do not have to agree with our conception, right? And those of you that weren't here, or that were, and remember, I spoke up in the valley once, and there was a girl standing next to me, and there was people saying thank you, and I turned and I said, did you need something? She goes, I just wanted to get a book. Oh my gosh, let's get her book. And we got her book, and then she stayed there, and I was like, sorry, write my number down. And she goes, can I ask you one more question? I said, sure. And she goes, I just want to make sure I'm in the right place. And I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, well, it's only my second meeting, and the lady earlier said that if I keep coming, that I'll find Jesus. And we're Jewish. And I just want to know if I'm in the right spot, if I can come back. Yes, you're in the right spot, So how important is it to go and to get somebody to understand my conception of what my personal understanding is with my higher power, and how I've done all this work, and then the ice cube finally melted, and I really have this connection with my higher power, that I expect that person on their very first day, in their first introduction, to agree with what I just went through in my journey. But if I tell them, you know what, I don't drink anymore, and I didn't have to die to get there. My name's Kelly. How many days you have? Well, you're welcome. I'm glad you're here. Those kind of things, right? So those kind of things are important. He does not have to agree with your conception of God. When dealing with such a person, you had better use everyday language to describe the spiritual principles. That's a direction. Honestly, this is why we're not going too far on this. But everyday language, what does that mean? Does that mean we should rewrite the 164 into... No, that's not what we're talking about. Somebody quoted that once going, everyday language. That's not what that means. It means when I meet somebody that's new, that's never been to an AA meeting, do I start off and say, what I have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition, and bless you, and you can come into AA now, and I'm going to talk about a few more things and quote page 449, or is it 419, acceptance is the answer, and all of a sudden they're going, okay, who are you? But it's not making sense to them. But if I go, hey, yeah, no, I had enough before I got here, I don't even drink anymore right now, and they're like, oh, you don't? Oh, yeah, I might have had a little, it's only 7 a.m., but yeah, I get that, And then they go, you don't drink? I'm like, no, I haven't had a drink in a little bit. And they go, how? And we start talking. Everyday language, whatever it is. But you've all had it happen, so we all know what I'm talking about. Everyday language. We just talk to people the way we talk to people. And if we're supposed to be helpful, we are. There is no use arousing any prejudice, I don't like it, he may have against certain theological or religious terms and concepts about which he may be already confused. Don't raise such issues, no matter what your own convictions are. Don't raise such issues. What happens if we get somebody to cross their arms and go, not going there? We jeopardize their life. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination himself, right? His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he's going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. Do you ever hear of somebody wearing a collar or a habit coming in and getting sober in the rooms? Yeah. But he'll be curious to learn how his own convictions have not worked when yours seem to have worked well. He may be an example of truth, and faith alone is insufficient. So I might go to church every day, but I can't seem to lick this drinking thing. And you seem to have like a week sober. How'd you do it? Right? How did you do that? To be vital, faith must be accompanied with self-sacrifice and unselfish constructive actions. A direction. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do. But call to his attention the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it, or he would not drink. Perhaps your story will help him see where he has failed to practice these very precepts he knows so well. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We represent no particular faith or denomination. We are dealing only with general principles common to most denominations. And what do we do then? We outline, it's a direction, we outline the program of action. Explaining how you made self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you're willing to now endeavor to be helpful to him. It's important for him to realize that your attempt to pass on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you're helping him. Make it plain that he is under no obligation to you, that you only hope that you hope only that he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Suggest how important that it is he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. Make it clear that he is under no pressure, that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. There's two directions in there that I think we fail to adhere to. Make it plain he's under no obligation to you. Make it clear that he is not under pressure. So many people have gotten somebody that, I'm going to get this person to sponsor me. They've got 12 days. I have 2. I'm so excited. And then we feel like that person is like, well, I already said yes, and I already told them, and now, well, I really want this person who's actually done the work out of the book and knows how to sponsor. I'm going to get them to sponsor me. But I feel guilty now because I asked this person with 12 days to sponsor me because I thought it'd be fun, or whatever the case may be. And now this person is like, yes, but you belong to me now, right? And all of a sudden we're like, well, we just won't go to meetings over in that side of town ever again. And I'll just go over here and secretly have my sponsor and work my steps with the person that knows how to work the steps out of the book, right? How many times do we feel obligated or under pressure? We don't do that to the newcomer. Sure, I can sponsor you for 20 minutes and then go get somebody else. Fine. Come back a year later. I don't care. There's 2 men talking to the guy on the bed there. We all do this together. We're all just clowns on the same bus helping one another. And there's been so many things that I could say about like times where we've all just kind of joined together and held hands to help one another. But it's got nothing to do with, well, I don't know. We're not under any obligation to anyone. Make it clear that they're under no pressure, because that sometimes scares somebody away more than a outstretched hand and a welcome. Okay? And that he needn't see you again if he doesn't want to. You should not be offended if he wants to call it off, for he has helped you more than you've helped him. If your talk has been sane, quiet, and full of human understanding, you have perhaps made a friend. Perhaps you have disturbed him about the question of alcoholism. You've planted the seed. This is all to the good. The more hopeless he feels, the better. He will be more likely to follow your suggestions. We haven't even mentioned the program or the book yet, right? This is just somebody I met in the supermarket line, and I told him I don't drink anymore, right? And I kind of was like, oh yeah, used everyday language, didn't talk down to him, right? If your candidate gives more reasons why he need not follow the program, he may rebel at the thought of drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. Do not contradict such views. So, I just want to get my court card signed. I don't want to do all that stuff that has to do with the steps. I've heard about it. I'm not doing it, right? Tell him, you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. And where's action at? In the program, in the steps, right? On your first visit, tell him about the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. If he shows interest, lend him your copy of this book. So yes, when somebody asks me to sponsor them, it's like on my first visit. The first thing I do is go, got a book? Need a book? Here's my number. Talk to me. We'll talk later, maybe later that afternoon. But my first question is, you got a book? Because in here it says, if they show an interest, my first thing is to go, got a book? Make sure they have a copy of this book. That's what I do. It even has a 1 on there. First. Unless your friend wants to talk further, about himself, don't wear out your welcome. Give him a chance to think it over. If you do stay, let him steer the conversation in any direction he likes. Sometimes a new man is anxious to proceed at once, and you may be tempted to let him do so. This is sometimes a mistake. If he's had trouble later, he is likely to say that you rushed him. You will be most successful with alcoholics if you do not exhibit any passion for crusade or reform. In my book, I have all the directions in green and stuff, but this is red and yellow and highlighted. It's like one of my favorite lines in the whole book. Never talk down to an alcoholic from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Simply lay out the kit of spiritual tools for his inspection. So that doesn't just mean in a meeting where we look across the room and we go, shut up, you get a ear and see what you take the cotton out of your ears, but it also sometimes goes with, I'm the sponsor and you must do exactly as I say, right? Or else you're fired and you failed, right? Sometimes we get in that. We feel like we have to take on that role. Oh my gosh, they want my help. I got to know what I'm talking about. Act like I don't even put on the sponsor hat and stand tall, right? But no, we just don't do that. We don't talk down from any moral or spiritual hilltop. Sometimes we talk, there's many times that this can come up, but we just don't do that. What do? We reach out our hand, we go, how can I be useful? How can I be helpful? How can I carry this message forward? And we lay out the simple kit of tools at their feet. So now they've got a book. We don't talk down to them from any moral or spiritual hilltop, right? Offer him friendship and fellowship. Tell him if he wants to get well that you'll do anything to help. If he's not interested in your solution, if he expects to act only as a banker for his financial difficulties or a nurse for his sprees, you may have to drop him until he changes his mind. We've heard that word, dropping somebody. But if somebody just wants to can you give me money, can you give me money, can you give me money? No, I don't want to go to any meetings. You may have to not keep giving the money. Go help somebody that wants to be helped, okay? This he may do after he gets hurt some more. He may come and ask. So what do we want them to do? We've already made sure they got a book, right? We don't talk down from any moral or spiritual hilltop. What do I want them to do? I want them to read the book. So if he's sincerely interested, these are directions, and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. I read it with people, because I think when I read it by myself, I'd fall asleep. But when I read it with somebody, it came to life. So I read it with them. But at the time this was written, we didn't have that opportunity. After doing that, he may decide for himself whether he wants to go on. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or friends. If he's to find God, the desire must come from within. If he thinks he can do the job in some other way, or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. If somebody goes, no, I don't need AA, I'm going to go get sober over here, well, okay, good. We're only looking to be helpful to the people we can help, right? We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. But point out that we alcoholics have much in common, and that you would like, in any case, to be friendly. Let it go at that. Do not be discouraged if your prospect does not respond at once. Search out another alcoholic and try again. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you have to offer. We find it a waste of time to keep chasing a man who cannot or will not work with you. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. To spend too much time on any one situation is to deny some other alcoholic the opportunity to live and be happy. One of our fellowship failed entirely with his first half dozen prospects. Who do you think they're talking about? Bill. Those first 6 months before he met Dr. Bob. He often says that if he had continued to work on them, he might have deprived many others who have since recovered of their chance. So we don't chase them down, right? And this is where we're going to end. This is the last paragraph. But this is where my sponsor ended with me. First, make sure they got a book. Never talk down from any moral or spiritual hilltop. She told me that's my job. I'm going to do that. I'm not going to criticize. It's your program, not mine. I'm just going to show you where it is outlined in this book, right? So now say you're making your second visit to a man. He's read this volume and said he's prepared to go through the 12 steps of the program of recovery. I remember I knew my sponsor for like 7 years, and I did this dramatic, will you sponsor me? And she said, well, do you have a book? And I was like shocked. I thought she was going to go, oh, I love this policy. Of course, right? And I heard this big no, but that's not what she was saying. She was doing exactly what was in this book that was directed to her. She's like, first thing she did was ask me if I have a book, and then she asked me to call her later. Huh? Well, we're going to go through the book. I'm like, what? I know what's on page 449 or 417 now. I can quote certain pages. She goes, no, we're going to go through the book if that's what you want, if you want me to do this with you. So what I did when, on our second visit, I was like, well, I'm prepared to go through this volume, and I'm prepared to go through the 12 steps of the program of recovery. She went right to this paragraph, and she goes, well, having had the experience myself, I can give much practical advice. And then she explained to me there's a difference between the clear-cut directions in the book and her, what I now call quirky ideas. 90 meetings in 90 days is not a direction in the book. Oh, okay. And that she's had much practical, sober experience that she can rely on, that she can help with, that she can offer. But it's not one of the clear-cut directions out of the book. Oh. So now I'm not going to go, wow, gee, she's going to sponsor me. I'm all excited. And then I hear somebody else say something in a meeting, and then I go, well, I don't know. Well, is she right? Is that person right? But I know that my sponsor's getting her clear-cut directions right out of this book, and I'm part of the we now because I know what's in this book. I feel a little bit more connected to this book that I know that there's her suggestions and then there's clear-cut directions. So she said, having had the experience myself, I can offer much practical advice, and that's different from the clear-cut directions. And then she said, I want you to know that I'm available if you wish to make a decision, which is step 3. We made a decision. And she also said that she's available if I wish to tell my story, which is 5. Why? Because those are 2 places we need somebody. And it says it, with somebody, right? Step 3, we took this step with somebody. So she says, well, if you want me to sponsor you, then I can offer much practical advice. We've already gone over. I'm not going to talk down to you. You've got a book. We'll go through it together. And I'm available if you wish to make a decision or tell your story, but I'm not going to insist upon it if you wish to consult someone else. So that means that if I decide after I'm doing these steps and I go over there and I go, Kelly, will you do my 3rd step with me? And then I go back to my sponsor. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did my 3rd step with Kelly. I'm so excited. She goes, oh, you're fired. No. She just goes, right on. Right on. But I would suggest if you're taking these steps with somebody that you trust to take you through this whole process, let them help you connect the dots so that you better can connect the dots with somebody else. Right on? Any questions? That's where we're going to stop tonight. We'll finish up working with others next week. Any questions? Yes!